Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason. I'm speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. And today I am continuing my top 100 albums list. Today I'm going to do number 90 and number 89 on my list. So thank you for watching and subscribing and liking my videos. I appreciate it. Enjoy making these, talking about music and movies. And so we're going to start with number 90 on my list, which is Hang On Sloopy by the McCoys, which came out in 1965 as their first studio album. Um, this isn't an album that it's probably not on anybody else's list of top 100 albums. I've never heard anybody else talk about this album. Um, so it's not one anybody, thinks highly of, but and probably if you're like me, I didn't even know there was a album called Hang On Sloopy. I just knew there was a song called Hang On Sloopy, as probably many of you do. If you ever heard of that song, it was a huge hit in 1965. It's a song that I loved growing up. Ever since I was a kid and I first kind of started listening to music, this was a song I remember hearing on the radio on the oldie station and always loving the song. And but I like the song so much. When I was looking up albums to listen to kind of make up my list of top 100 albums, and I listened to a bunch of albums last year to kind of come up with this list. And I just came across, I was looking up albums in 1965, and this album was on a list of albums that came out, and I was like, wow, I like that song, so let me see if I can find it. And I found it on Spotify. In fact, this is the only album you can find on Spotify from the McCoys. It's their first one, Hang On Sloopy. So I was like, well, I'll give it a listen and see if it's any good. And I listened to it, and I really liked it, so I was like, wow, this is a really good album. Too bad I haven't listened to any other McCoy albums, but I doubt any of them have been as good as this one, because Hang On Sloopy is really the only really huge hit that they had that I know about in their career. I really like this album from the McCoys. Looking at it, it's kind of interesting. I think some interesting information. The members of the band, there's two brothers. Their last names are originally Zeringer, or Zeringer. Rick changed his name to Rick Derringer, so he's known as Rick Derringer, but his original name was Rick Zeringer. And he's the lead singer and lead guitarist of the group. Really the MVP of this group. I mean, great vocals, great guitar work. His brother Randy Zeringer does the drums and really good drum work on this album. And then they have Randy Joe Hobbs on bass, Shawn Michaels on saxophone, and Ronnie Brandon on keyboard. And so that's the band, basically 5 members, 2 brothers, and then 3 other members kind of joined in later because they're from Ohio, but they moved to Indiana, and they formed a group called Rick and the Raiders in Indiana. 2 brothers, and then they had another guy who was a bass player. So it was like a 3-man group, I believe, to begin with. And of course, they became pretty good there in Indiana, and was doing some tours with some other groups. And of course, Rick was really talented, so I can imagine he, people listened to him probably, noticed him and wanted him to, be on the tour, opening for other bands. So that's how they kind of started before they were in the McCoys. So then there's these 3 guys from New York named Bob Feldman, Jerry Goldstein, and Richard Goderer. And they were songwriters and record producers. Before this album, they had a hit with "My Boyfriend's Back" and "I Want Candy" were 2 big hits that they had before this album. They were the song. They wrote some songs for this album. They wrote 3 songs for this album, and they also produced this album, Hang On Sloopy. So they had a group called the Strangeloves that they were producing and writing for, and they had a hit song, "I Want Candy" with the Strangeloves. And while on tour, Rick and the Raiders were with them, and they loved Rick's voice so much that they had him actually sing with the band Strangeloves, or had him, I think, sing in some of the recordings and so forth. So they really liked Rick, and they were looking for another, hit song. And so "Hang On Sloopy" wasn't a song that they wrote. "Hang On Sloopy" was written by another songwriter producer named Burt Burns. And Burt Burns wrote the song, and it became a hit with a group called the Vibrations, an R&B group. And it was actually a top 10 hit, actually, in 1964. So it was already kind of a hit song, though I never heard it any other version except for the McCoy version, and I doubt anybody else has. It's the only one you ever hear on the radio, of course, and so of course it's the biggest song of their career, the McCoys, and I mean it's the biggest uh, version of that song. And so somewhere in there they gave the song "Hang On Sloopy" to Rick and the Raiders to sing as a single. They changed Rick and the Raiders' name because there was already a group called Paul Revere and the Raiders, so they decided they don't want two groups called the Raiders. It's too confusing, so they changed their name to the McCoys, so that's how they got to the McCoys. And they came out with Hang On Sloopy as a single. Of course, huge hit, number one single in 1965. And so then after that hit, of course, they said, well, we need to make a record, with the song on it, and we can get a hit record out of it. And so that's why these three songwriter producers kind of came up with this album and produced it. It's mostly cover songs with, like I said, three like original songs written by those three. um, so so the McCoys they make this album, Hang On Sloopy, and of course he pretty big hit. You look at the listing of the songs. Like I said, the three songwriters wrote three of the songs on there, which are pretty good. I think the best songs on there besides "Hang On Sloopy." And "Hang On Sloopy" is the only song I really ever knew from this album. Of course, when I first was listening to it, I didn't know any of the music except for "Hang On Sloopy," but I love "Hang On Sloopy" so much, so I was willing to give this album a try, which I'm glad I did. I think it's a really solid album. Too bad nobody talks about it, but it's my kind of album. I think I love the 60s rock music, so it's really the kind of music I love. I kind of grew up on a little bit, so I love it. A little interesting information on the song "Hang On Sloopy." Burt Burns wrote it. He said that he wrote it because he was traveling in Cuba, and that Cuban men would call women Sloopy as like a nickname for, I guess, women or something. Maybe an endearing name for a woman. That's what he said Sloopy came from, and he wrote the song "Hang On Sloopy," because Sloopy is such a weird name. I remember as a kid I heard "Hang On Sloopy," and I swore it was "Hang On Snoopy." For a long time I thought the song was "Hang On Snoopy, Snoopy Hang On." I don't know why that made sense to me, because I knew Snoopy from the cartoons and from the comics. And then later I was like, oh, it's not Snoopy, it's Sloopy. It's still strange. Who's Sloopy? I never heard that word before. Um, well, years later, Rick Derringer said in interviews that Burt Burns actually didn't write the song. That a high school kid in St. Louis wrote the song, and I forget exactly how, but somehow it got to Burt Burns, this song, "Hang On Sloopy," that he wrote, and he liked it so much that he bought the rights off the song from this kid. For, I don't know how much money, but I forget, this guy that wrote the song. I mean, he said this later that he was the one who wrote the song. Said, of course, he's just a high school kid, so he got this money for it. But of course, if he would have, kept the rights of the song, he would have made a lot more money. So he kind of, kicks himself that he. I think he's like a speaker or some kind. I think he goes around speaking at places for something. And so he tells the story about, he could have made a lot more money if he would have kept a hold of the song, kind of as a life lesson. But anyways, so it's kind of interesting that Burt Burns, he claims that he wrote it, but yet there's also some some different viewpoints that somebody else wrote it. So I don't know who exactly did write it, because two different people have said. I don't know if it can be totally proven true who wrote the song, but it's kind of interesting to think that somebody took someone else's song and then took all the credit for it and has made a lot of money off the song "Hang On Sloopy." But a lot thought the song was inspired by a jazz singer in Ohio named Dorothy Sloop. So they think they took Sloop, that the kid from St. Louis took the name Sloopy from this woman, Dorothy Sloop from Ohio. Because "Hang On Sloopy," interestingly, is like the rock song. It's the official rock song of the state of Ohio, which I didn't know about until I was reading about this. I didn't know you had a state rock song. I don't know. Kansas has a state rock song. Maybe it's like Wayward Son or something. One of the Kansas songs. I don't know. But yeah, so it's very popular there. The band, the marching band, plays it like at every football game in Ohio State University. So it's a huge song in Ohio, especially for some reason. I don't know if it's because the Derringers are originally from Ohio, or the Derringers are originally from Ohio, um, or that Dorothy Sloop is from Ohio and went to Ohio State University. But anyway, so it's a huge song there. I thought that was interesting. Um, yeah, so looking at the song list, of course, Hang On Sloopy, it's kind of the first song. Interestingly, what's on the first, it's not a song, but what's um, first name on the list is called Meet the McCoys. Uh, and exactly what it is, Meet the McCoys. I've never seen this on another album. I think it's kind of funny. It's just Rick Derringer introducing the band. It's like 2 minutes of him just saying, "Let me introduce you to the band. We got," and it's kind of funny because he's like, "We got on drums, Randy Derringer, and he's the greatest drummer in the world." And then I have to say that because he's my brother, and so it's kind of funny. And as he's introduces Randy as the drummer, and all of a sudden you hear some drumming in the background. And then he goes to, here's Randy, the bass player, and then all of a sudden you hear bass playing, and so on. So as he introduces them, they start playing their instruments. And then he said, "I'm Rick," and he starts playing. I'm the guitar player, and he plays his guitar, and we're the McCoys, anyways. And that's the first 2 minutes. So it's kind of funny that I've never seen anybody else introduce themselves in an album. I guess they did that because nobody knew who the McCoys were maybe at the time, and it was like, so you listen to it, you go, "Oh, okay, these are the McCoys." Like, I don't know. There's no internet to read about, so I guess you only know people through, listening to interviews and stuff like that. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting that they opened with that. Like I said, I didn't know any of the other songs on here. The album itself, well, I know some of the songs actually, not by them. They do have 2 James Brown songs, which I'm not a fan of James Brown, and I think they're probably the 2 weakest songs on this album. They also have a song, I Can't Help Falling in Love, which is a famous song by Elvis. Also, they have a Bob Dylan song called All I Really Want to Do, which is the album, I think, on Another Side of Bob Dylan, one of Bob Dylan's early albums. This song was also covered by the Byrds in their first album, Mr. Tambourine Man, which is an album that's farther up on my list that I love. And just going through the songs, like I said, the 3 songs that are written by Feldman, Goldstein, and Goddard are actually really good. Actually, my favorite songs on this are some of my favorite songs on this, including "Sorrow," "If You Tell a Lie," and "I Can't Explain It." 3 really great, catchy rock songs. Like, "Sorrow's" not so much rock; it's a little softer, but 3 really good songs on here. Like, I wish the album had been more songs written by them. Of course, I always like original material. Interesting, like this is the first album I've reviewed here or really looked at that none of the songs are written by any of the band members. So it's almost like they said, "Hey, let's get a band that sounds good. We can give them the songs to sing," and it's almost like the Monkees. Like the Monkees didn't have to write their own songs. It's like, we'll write the songs for you. You just have to sing them and look good on stage, and and it worked out for some bands like this. But not for the long run. The McCoys weren't, like this. They didn't have any other really huge hits besides "Hang On Sloopy," so it wasn't a long term. McCoys weren't going to be huge long term, but in the short term, it worked really well. I guess there's a song called "Fever" on here, which is a cover song, a really good cover song on here. Made famous by Peggy Lee, I believe, was the singer that in the 50s. It was a song made like in 1956 or something like that, written back then. It was a hit back then, so but they do a really good version of it here. Like, I think I've heard that song before. I'm not real familiar, but yeah, really good version here. Like I said, the Elvis song, "I Can't Fall in Love," is actually pretty good. The Bob Dylan "All I Want to Really Do" is a really good cover song from Bob Dylan. I'd say better than the original. So there's some really good, I think, songs. Like I said, the James Brown songs, I think, are weak. And then the very last song, "Stormy Monday Blues," is a little bit of a bluesier song I didn't really like. But everything else I thought was actually really solid on this album. It's really good. So, and pretty surprised because a lot of these songs I didn't know. And I was like, wow, I really like this song. I don't know why this wasn't a bigger hit. So that was interesting. The album on itself reached number 44 on the U.S. charts, so top 50 album. I said not on any huge list of like top albums of all time, but just an album I really like, just because I love catchy 60s rock music, pop rock music, and so this is just the kind of music I like. Anyways, that's why it reached me probably more than anybody else. Two singles on here, because Hang On Sloopy went number 1, of course, huge hit. And then I said Fever went number 7 on the U.S., which I didn't know Fever was a hit song. But number 7, so it was a top 10 song, so that's pretty good. So 2 top 10 hits on this album, so that's something. It's kind of my analysis of this album, so I'll just give my top 3. Number 3 is actually a song called Sorrow, which I said was one of the songs written by the 3 producers, songwriter producers. Really good. I love Rick's vocals. It's a little more soft. It's got a really nice melody to it. It's a little more of a softer song, not real hard rock, or none of them are hard rock, but not as rock as the other songs. But yeah, really solid song. I love the melody on there. Number 2 is a song called I Can't Explain It, another song written by the 3 producers. Just a really super catchy rock song, and I just love like Rick is a really good vocalist. I really like his vocals, and then the back vocals are pretty good too. There's a lot of oohs, ahs like in the background that harmonize really good. I love when background singers harmonizing the background. I love that. It always sound good. But what I love is like he's singing, and then the background they're singing like I can't explain it. It must be love. It's all about he's in love and he can't explain it. And they go in the background, singers go oh, and I love that how they do that, how they reach that high note and kind of I don't know how to say it. Oh, it kind of goes down, and it's just great. I love that kind of stuff. And then number 1 is gotta be Hang On Sloopy, of course. How could it not be? That's such a huge song. I love the beginning of that drum, boom, 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 boom. Once you hear that drum sound, you're like, oh yes, like I know what this is, boom, 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 and then boom, 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 boom. The bass gets in there, and you're like, all right, here it comes, and then they hit you right with Hang On Sloopy, the chorus in a harmony unison. And it hits you really good at the beginning, so it's just a great beginning to the song that really hooks you into it, and you're like yes, I love this. This chorus is real catchy. I love the harmonies, and then yeah, Rick's great. Really sings really well on the song, and then there's a really nice guitar solo in the middle. Really good rock. One of the best guitar solos I think of this time that I've ever heard. It's always a favorite of mine on the radio, just because I remember listening to it going, man, that's a great guitar solo. It's a short song, not too long, so it's just perfect. I think it's one of my favorite songs of the '60s. Hang On Sloopy. So yeah, so that's my top 3. That's my review on Hang On Sloopy, number 90 on my top 100 album list. So my next album I'm going to cover today is an album called Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. by Simon and Garfunkel. It came out in 1964, and it was their first studio album. This is a very interesting album too to kind of do research on, and it's another album that nobody ever talks about. First studio album. It wasn't a successful album. It didn't sell a lot of albums or anything. It said certified U.S. platinum, but it didn't chart at all album wise, and there was no single on here that charted. Anyway, so yeah, it was a very unsuccessful album for them. The first album out. But yeah, I really like this album. Of course, I'm a huge fan of Simon Garfunkel. I love their harmonies. They're the best like duo harmony group of all time for sure. They're the standard bearer. Anytime you talk about harmonies and a duo singing, it's Simon Garfunkel. That's the group. That's the best. So it's interesting. As I was looking through the Simon Garfunkel, they didn't make that many albums, like only 5 albums or something. So it's pretty easy to go through the discography. And so when I was going through all their albums, like I was really pleasantly surprised by how good or how much I like this album, and that nobody else talks about this album. It's not on any list, kind of like the last album. Nobody talks about it. Nobody has it on their top 100 list. But so I'm kind of unusual that like I take an album like this that nobody really cares about, and I think, man, this is a really good album. I really enjoyed it. But it was interesting because like I said, this was their first album, so of course they weren't famous yet. Uh, Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel from New York. They were friends, and they went to school together. They went to Columbia University in New York. They went to college together, and of course they formed the duo in college, and obviously really good. And they went as Tom and Jerry was their name. They weren't Simon and Garfunkel. Their name was Tom and Jerry for some reason. Interesting name. And so then they auditioned for Columbia Records for a record deal to make an album. Anyway, so they went audition, did really well. The producer Tom Wilson, really liked them and signed them to make a record, which was this record, runs at Wednesday morning 3 a.m. So it's a lot of cover songs. Paul Simon's like one of the greatest songwriters of all time, of course. Very poetic songwriter, really good. He has, looks like 4 originals out of the 12 songs on here. So only 4 original Paul Simon songs on here. The other 8 are cover songs. So it's not a usual Simon Garfunkel album, because usually you have all the songs by Paul Simon because he's such a great writer. But of course he's just starting out at this point, so he hasn't quite hit, as one of the great songwriters. But they have a great sound, and it's obvious in this album. You listen to it, the sound is amazing. I love hearing those two sing. They can sing just about anything. It sounds great. So they got the record deal probably based on how great they sounded together. And then later, of course, you find out that Simon's also a great songwriter. Of course, he wrote one of the best songs here. The Sounds of Silence is on this album. So, and you're thinking, Sounds of Silence, that's like one of their biggest hits. How is this not a big hit? Well, interesting that the Sounds of Silence that are on this album is the acoustic version, which is the version you don't really hear on the radio. It's just Simon Garfunkel with acoustic guitar. It sounds really good. I mean, it's still just a great song. I mean, a wonderfully written song. But it wasn't a hit song at that time, the way it was in this album. But yeah, looking at the album itself, like The Sounds of Silence is the only like big song on here, and the only song I really knew. There's a Bob Dylan cover song, The Times They Are Changing, which is a great song from Bob Dylan, which I think it was the Byrds, I think, did that song on Turn, Turn, Turn. So I already heard an album with this song on it. And Bob Dylan, he's got to be the most covered artist of all time, because I already heard him being covered. I said already on Hang On Sloopy, the McCoys did All I Really Want to Do. They covered that. And I know the Byrds are done this one. Simon Garfunkel have a Bob Dylan song on here. So it seems like every other album I listen to has a Bob Dylan cover song on it. That's how good he was of a songwriter. So this album was not successful. Came out, didn't do anything. Paul Simon ended up moving to England for a little after that, and he even came out with his own album called like the Simon Songbook, and which wasn't a hit or anything. Didn't do anything there in England, but he was in England playing in clubs, I think, and playing around with his acoustic guitar and writing songs, and I think he fell in love with a girl there, if I remember right. Anyway, so he went off to England. Art Garfunkel was still, they kind of broke up basically. Art Garfunkel was still at Columbia University doing his own thing. So they kind of split up. It seems like Simon Garfunkel never going to be a big thing. The album does nothing, so this could be the end of one of the greatest groups of all time, interestingly. But then in 1965, the producer Tom Wilson was seeing that the song Sounds of Silence was actually getting a lot of airplay in Massachusetts and Florida. I don't know why those two states, but he kind of saw that there was a lot of potential for that song to be a hit song, as it was being played a lot there. So he decided to take a look at that song again, took it, remixed it, added electric guitar, added a bass, added drums, and that's the version that you hear on the radio. Anytime you hear the song on the radio, it's that version with the other instruments. So he remixed it, put it out again in September 1965. Became a huge hit. Was a #1 single in 1966, January of 1966. So it went from a song that nobody really knew or heard off this album to then becoming one of the biggest songs of 1966. And then Simon Garfunkel had no idea that Thomas Wilson was doing this. Like I said, Paul was in England. Art was in Columbia University. No one told them that they're remixing the song and putting it back out as a single. So next thing they know, they got a number one single in America with Sounds of Silence. So of course, once they got that number one single, they Simon came back to the United States. They kind of formed again, and then the next album is Sounds of Silence. So they took that song and made a whole album based on that song, basically to make a hit record. Anyways, and that's actually an album that's going to be further on my list. It's another album I really like from Simon Garfunkel. Anyway, so that's a really interesting, I thought, super interesting story. I never knew about that until I was doing research on the album, that Sounds of Silence wasn't a hit song at first, and then it was only after it got remixed that it became a hit song, and Simon Garfunkel became a hit band because of that. So really interesting. Overall, yeah, great album, great harmonies, vocals. Like I said, Paul Simon songs are, again, his songs are like my favorite songs on the album. I always love when artists write their own songs. I don't know if it's just because they write it for themselves, so they know what they're really good at singing. But like Bleecker Street, and these songs I never heard of before, really good songs. So Bleecker Street, Sparrow, The Sound of Silence, of course. And then Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m., the title of the album, is the last song on here. It's a really good song. All wonderfully written by Paul, and great harmonies by both. I say, and Simon, I never thought of him as like a great vocalist. I always thought Garfunkel was the better vocalist because he had this, and I love Garfunkel's voice. He had this really great high tenor voice. It sounds amazing. And it's so good when they sing together, just because Garfunkel's high tenor voice. You really notice the two voices together. But Simon has some really great vocals in here. Actually, some songs he really sings out with some power, which I didn't know he had some powerful vocals. So I don't know if that was just because it's early on in his career. I felt like later on you don't think about his vocals as much. I mean, they're fine. He's a good singer, but I never thought of him as like really great, powerful singer. But some of these songs he really sings some loud vocals that really sound good. So I give a lot to Simon. Sound really good on this record. And I say he really dominates. Always feel like Paul Simon's voice kind of dominates the two, and it's almost more like it's Paul Simon, but Art Garfunkel kind of, you hear his high tenor voice kind of in the background almost of these songs. So there's no song where it's just where Garfunkel takes the lead vocal. It's really Paul Simon takes the lead vocal, and Garfunkel kind of harmonizes off of him. Anyway, but obviously it sounds really good. Like I said, a lot of cover songs. Interesting, like there's two like kind of gospel songs, /hymn songs on here. You Can Tell the World and Go Tell It on the Mountain. Of course, Go Tell It on the Mountain, very famous hymn song that's sung a lot in churches. I grew up singing that song, and they sound fine here. But it's just interesting. You don't hear a lot of gospel songs on a lot of these albums. At least I don't. Peggy O, I thought was a really excellent song. It's kind of an Irish song that Paul Simon rearranges. Really catchy song. He Was My Brother. It was a really powerful song. A lot of powerful vocals in that one. Yeah, The Sun Is Burning. Very excellent. Simon Garfunkel definitely really great on that. But yeah, so yeah, it's a very solid album. I totally recommend it. It's an album that nobody talks about, but it's an underrated album in my opinion. I think definitely check it out if you like Simon Garfunkel. I think you'll like this album. So go to my top 3 songs on here. Number 3 for me is Bleecker Street, which I said was one of Paul Simon's originals on here. Yeah, really good. Just, if you like Paul Simon, it's a Paul Simon kind of song that his style of singing. Really enjoy it. Great melody. Great harmony, of course. Not a song I've ever heard before, and I don't know why. It could have been a hit song to me. If I heard it on the radio, I've been like, this is a good song. So definitely one to check out. Number 2 for me is Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m., the title of the album. Really good song. I mean, very underrated song. Another song I think could have been a hit on the radio that I never heard before. I don't know if it ever was on the radio, but I never heard it before. But evidently they named the whole album off of the song, Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m., so they must have liked the song to name the album off of it. Maybe they thought that was the bigger song than Sounds of Silence. I don't know. But yeah, another really solid melody, harmony song from Paul Simon. And interesting lyrics, too. If I remember right, I think it talks about holding up a liquor store and stuff like that. Yeah, really good. And then number one, of course, again, it's obvious. The Sounds of Silence is one of the greatest. Probably my favorite Simon and Garfunkel song of all time. And this is the acoustic version, which is still pretty good. I don't know. I like both versions. Both the acoustic and the electric versions are all both really, really good songs. But I love that guitar at the beginning, the bump, 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 bump. You hear the picking of those high strings on the acoustic guitar, and it just, I don't know, kind of hooks you in right away. You're like, oh, I love the sound. And then that very first line, so great. One of the great lines, hello, darkness, my old friend. When you hear that, hello, darkness, my old friend, you're just like, oh, man, this is so good. And harmony. And, yeah, very great vocals in the song. I, of course, love the acoustic guitar work. I'm not sure exactly what the song's about, but the lyrics are very interesting. When you listen to them, you're like, I don't know, very poetic. And so credible that Simon wrote the song, so early in his career. And he's shown himself to be this really great songwriter at such a young age. Pretty amazing. I don't know. I always loved the line, "Silence like a cancer grows." I always thought that was a really interesting line in the song. Just the name of the song is great. The Sound of Silence, because silence doesn't have a sound. It's silence. You can't have sound if you have silence. So it's such a great name for a song, The Sound of Silence. That's trying to say that silence has its own sound. I mean, it's a great name for a song. And yeah, one of the all-time favorite songs of the 60s. So I guess you can say these two albums, I like them. I kind of was hooked on them because I love Hang On Sloopy, the song. I love Sounds of Silence. But then I listened to the album, and it's just both are really solid albums, in my opinion. So that's my review today of my on my top 100. Number 90, Hang On Sloopy. Number 89, Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. So yeah, give those songs or those albums a chance, I think, and let me know in the comments if you've heard these albums or if you like them, you don't like them. I love reading the comments and seeing what other people think. So. Again, thanks for watching. Thank you for all my subscribers. I really appreciate you guys, and take care.